From 1939 to 1975, Spain was ruled by Francisco Franco, a military dictator whose reign was marked by severe repression, violence, and fear. Franco's rise to power during the Spanish Civil War and his subsequent dictatorship plunged Spain into decades of autocratic rule, leaving a legacy of trauma and division that still echoes in the country today. This narrative explores the reign of terror under Francisco Franco, the mechanisms of control and repression he employed, and the lasting impact of his dictatorship on Spain's history and its people.
Francisco Franco was born on December 4, 1892, in El Ferrol, Spain, into a military family. His early career in the Spanish army saw him rise quickly through the ranks, and by the 1930s, he had become one of Spain's most prominent military leaders. Franco's ascent to power began during the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, a brutal conflict between the leftist Republicans and the right-wing nationalists, of which Franco became the leader. The war ended with the victory of Franco's nationalist forces, and on April 1, 1939, he declared himself the head of state, assuming the title of caudillo or leader. His victory marked the beginning of a dictatorship that would last until his death in 1975. The regime he established was characterized by strict authoritarianism, censorship, and widespread repression.
Franco's regime was built on the foundations of fear and control. Immediately after the Civil War, Franco initiated a brutal campaign to eliminate any opposition to his rule. This period, often referred to as the White Terror, saw tens of thousands of Republicans, leftists, intellectuals, and other perceived enemies of the state executed, imprisoned, or forced into exile. Franco's Spain was a deeply divided society, with the wounds of the Civil War still fresh. The regime maintained control through a combination of propaganda, censorship, and the ruthless suppression of dissent. The Guardia Civil, a paramilitary police force, played a key role in enforcing Franco's policies, using intimidation and violence to silence any opposition. One of the most notorious elements of Franco's reign was the systematic targeting of political opponents. Thousands of people were arrested, tortured, and executed in the years following the Civil War. The Franco regime also established a network of concentration camps and forced labor camps, where political prisoners were subjected to harsh conditions and brutality. It is estimated that as many as 200,000 people were killed as a result of Franco's repression during his rule.
Franco's dictatorship was marked by the centralization of power and the suppression of regional identities. He sought to create a homogeneous Spanish state, rooted in conservative Catholic values. To this end, he banned regional languages like Catalan, Basque, and Galician from public life, enforcing a policy of linguistic and cultural uniformity. Any expression of regional identity was harshly repressed, further deepening the divides within Spanish society. Censorship was another crucial tool in Franco's arsenal. The regime tightly controlled the press, radio, and film, ensuring that only pro-Franco propaganda reached the public. Books and works of art that were deemed subversive were banned or destroyed, and artists, writers, and intellectuals who opposed the regime were silenced or forced into exile. The Catholic Church played a significant role in supporting Franco's rule. The regime and the Church were closely aligned, with the Church providing moral legitimacy to Franco's policies in exchange for favorable treatment. Religious education was compulsory, and the Church exerted considerable influence over social and cultural life in Spain. Despite the oppressive nature of Franco's rule, there were moments of resistance. Underground movements, including the Communist Party and various regional nationalist groups, continued to oppose the regime, often at great personal risk. The Basque separatist group ETA, founded in 1959, waged a violent campaign against Franco's rule, carrying out bombings and assassinations in an effort to gain independence for the Basque Country.
Francisco Franco's death on November 20, 1975, marked the end of his dictatorship, but the legacy of his reign of terror continued to shape Spain for decades. Following Franco's death, Spain transitioned to a democracy, a process known as the Spanish Transition. King Juan Carlos I, whom Franco had groomed as his successor, played a pivotal role in steering the country toward democratic reforms. The transition was not without its challenges, as Spain grappled with the legacy of Franco's rule. The Pact of Forgetting, an informal agreement to avoid addressing the crimes of the Franco era in the interest of national reconciliation, meant that many victims of the regime never saw justice. It wasn't until decades later that Spain began to confront its past more openly, with the passing of the Historical Memory Law in 2007, which aimed to recognize the victims of Franco's repression and remove symbols of the dictatorship from public spaces. The scars left by Franco's reign are still visible in Spain today. The country remains divided over how to remember the Franco era, with some viewing him as a necessary stabilizing force and others condemning him as a brutal dictator. The exhumation of Franco's body from the Valley of the Fallen in 2019, and its reburial in a less prominent site, sparked renewed debate over his legacy and the ongoing struggle to reconcile with the past. Franco's dictatorship had a profound impact on Spain's social and cultural landscape. The repression of regional identities and languages left deep wounds, and the effects of decades of censorship and propaganda are still felt. Yet, despite the trauma of the Franco years, Spain has emerged as a vibrant democracy, a testament to the resilience of its people and their commitment to freedom and justice.
The reign of terror under Francisco Franco was a dark chapter in Spain's history, marked by violence, repression, and fear. Franco's dictatorship left an indelible mark on the country, shaping its political, social, and cultural landscape for decades. As Spain continues to grapple with the legacy of Franco's rule, the story of his dictatorship serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of authoritarianism and the enduring struggle for justice and democracy. The lessons of the Franco era remain relevant today, as Spain and the world reflect on the importance of confronting the past to build a better future.